There is certainly a connection between these two. Prescription painkillers became a huge problem in our country in the 90s. Some people blame Purdue Pharma, the manufacturer of Oxycontin, for promoting the drug as something that wasn't addictive, and advising physicians not to be concerned that their patients might get addicted to this powerful painkiller. And so prescriptions, painkillers like Oxycontin began to flood the market. People became addicted. And then we started to see pill mills, and we started to see doctors who weren't playing by the rules and pharmacists who weren't playing by the rules. Law enforcement finally caught up to it, and we did a really good job of cracking down on the pill mills. State legislatures did a good job of changing laws and making it more difficult to operate in a way that was going to cause people to become addicted. As a result, painkillers became much harder to acquire, and the switch was made over to heroin because it was cheaper and provided many of the same effects that those painkillers provided. More than 2/3 of heroin addicts have previously abused prescription painkillers. So you can see the connection there. An Oxycontin on the street, an Oxy 80 goes for about $80. Pretty expensive. A bag of heroin around here can go for $8 to $10. And so you get a lot more bang for your buck getting a hit of heroin than you would get spending $80 on one pill. This study came out last summer from the CDC, and according to this study, and the data is pretty reliable. This is coming from prescriptions that were actually written by doctors and filled by pharmacists. In the United States, West Virginia is number 3 in prescriptions of opioid pain relievers issued. In other words, we're at the top of the list of prescriptions being issued for these types of drugs. For every 100 residents in West Virginia, there are 138 prescriptions written for painkillers. There are a lot of painkillers prescriptions being written here in West Virginia for whatever reason. Alabama and Tennessee were at 143 per every 100. We're way above the national average in that. And I've gone out and talked to community groups, and people have said, whatever happened to just taking a couple of Advil and going to the physical therapist? Well, I think a small percentage, and I don't want to paint a broad brush of the medical community, but a small percentage of doctors got comfortable in just simply writing prescriptions for painkillers and not really looking at alternative forms of treatment when those might have been more appropriate than giving someone a 60 or 90-day supply of Oxycontin because they've got a bad back or a bad neck or something else. So we're right at the top of that list, and we're not saying that all of those are bad scripts. We're just saying a lot of those are being written. I want to talk, as I wrap things up here, about naloxone. This is also referred to as Narcan. This is something that's carried by EMTs. This saves lives. If someone is overdosing from heroin and this is administered, and it's a nasal spray, at least that's what we're seeing more people carry now. If this is administered, it reverses the overdose if it's done in a timely fashion. It can bring someone back to life. Thousands of lives have been saved by first responders administering Narcan and bringing somebody back. There's some legislation right now in the state of West Virginia being considered to try and expand that. There's some immunity issues that they want to make sure that first responders are covered. Don't know where that's going to go, but that was mentioned by the governor in his State of the State address, and also it's being talked about in the House and the State Senate right now. I also want to mention Good Samaritan laws. That's not something that's on the books in West Virginia, but a lot of states have also passed a Good Samaritan law. What that means is that if you're a heroin user and you're with someone and they are overdosing and they need help from first responders, you can pick up the phone, call first responders. Police ultimately will probably come as well. But you won't be arrested if you have small quantities of drugs or paraphernalia on your person, and your friend will get help and hopefully survive. The reason why that's so important, and as crazy as this seems, a lot of people, drug users, are very reluctant to call the police even if their friend is sitting there dying because they're afraid they're going to go to jail. They don't want to go to jail because they're going to go through withdrawal. And withdrawal for a heroin addict is about the worst thing that could happen to them. They're always looking for that next hit so that they won't go through that withdrawal. Think about the worst cold you've ever had. times 1,000. That's how heroin addicts describe the withdrawal symptoms from the drug. And so a Good Samaritan law allows someone to call without the concern that they're going to jail. This wouldn't prevent someone who's a dealer from going to jail, or someone who's got a large quantity of heroin, dealer quantities on them, from going to jail. But this would prevent the just a small-time user from going to jail and feeling more comfortable about picking up the telephone. We have had cases that our office has looked at and that we've prosecuted involving people who were with a friend who was overdosing, and they were charged with delivery of the drug. But instead of calling the police because their friend was, or the EMTs because their friend was overdosing, they just put a pillow under the head and left because they were afraid that they were going to get into trouble. And we've also heard of cases of body dumping, people who don't know what to do because a friend of theirs has overdosed, and that's what their answer is. So that's the Good Samaritan law, and it's something that we don't have in West Virginia, but many states do. Let me talk briefly about the Drug Task Force. We are incredibly blessed to have a drug task force here in Harrison County, made up of officers and agents from the Clarksburg Police Department, the Bridgeport Police Department, the State Police, the DEA, with support from the ATF and the Marshal Service and IRSCI. Last year, 2014, individuals investigated by this task force were sentenced to over 130 years in prison for drug trafficking offenses. This task force also got a shot in the arm just in 2014 from the Appalachia HIDA initiative. These are federal dollars that come to Harrison County, and hundreds of thousands of federal dollars that will come here to support this task force and its efforts to go after the out-of-town drug dealers that try to set up shop here. This task force does an incredible job. We've also got the SCAD unit with the Sheriff's Department that's also out there working very hard to do things very similar to this drug task force. Another tool that we added to our arsenal recently was the Mountaineer Highway Interdiction team, made up of a few of those same departments, Bridgeport, Clarksburg, and the State Police. This unit also deserves a tremendous amount of credit for interdicting drugs that are coming here on the highways and secondary roads, as well as through parcels and packages. We see a lot of drugs coming in via UPS, FedEx, via the Postal Service, and also on the highways. And so what this unit is set up to do is to work with the Drug Task Force. When they know that a big shipment is coming in, it will help to interdict that package. Or on the other end of that, if they make a traffic stop and drugs are recovered, it will communicate with the Drug Task Force to let the task force know that maybe there's a further investigation that's necessary. So we're very lucky to have this unit here in the area. One thing I'll say about the task force is this. When we're all asleep, they're out there working. It just happened again the other night at 1 in the morning. A large supplier came into town from out of town with a large amount of pills that he wanted to put out onto the streets of Harrison County. And I woke up, I heard my phone vibrating next to my head when I was asleep, and I woke up the next day and I saw it was some activity and some messaging about all the great work that had been done the night before in seizing the drugs and arresting the bad guy, and now he's been charged in federal court. And so those guys are in the shadows. You don't know who they are, but they're keeping us all safe, and so we're very lucky to have them. In fact, some of them wanted to be here tonight, but there's an operation going on right now in the area, and they couldn't be here. So again, as we sit here, they're working for us, and we're very lucky to have them. I am now going to introduce our panelists and get into our discussion.